I stood frozen in the doorway of my childhood bedroom, watching a complete stranger hold up my grandfather's vintage pocket watch. The woman turned it over in her hands, admiring the gold casing. "This is gorgeous," she said to her friend beside her. "And you said everything here is free?" My stepmother, Diana, leaned against the dresser with her arms crossed, wearing that satisfied smile I'd come to know too well. "Absolutely free," she replied. "My stepdaughter left all this junk behind. She clearly doesn't want it anymore." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. That watch wasn't junk. It had belonged to my grandfather, passed down to me before he died. More importantly, it was registered with the National Heirloom Registry, complete with serial numbers, photographs, and legal documentation proving my ownership. Diana had no idea what she'd just done, but she was about to find out. I cleared my throat loudly from the doorway, and both women turned to look at me with surprised expressions. Diana's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she quickly recovered her composure. "Oh, Cassidy," she said, her tone dripping with that fake sweetness she used whenever my father was within earshot. "I thought you were at work today. Did something happen?" I stepped into the room slowly, my eyes scanning the absolute chaos that surrounded me. My belongings were spread across every available surface. Books stacked haphazardly on the floor, clothes draped over chairs, jewelry scattered across the bed, photographs thrown carelessly into boxes, everything I owned laid out like cheap merchandise at a garage sale. "I took a half day," I said quietly, fighting to keep my voice steady despite the rage building inside my chest. My hands trembled at my sides, but I forced them to remain still. The stranger holding my grandfather's watch looked between us nervously, clearly sensing the tension that had suddenly filled the room. "Is there a problem here?" she asked uncertainly. Diana waved her hand dismissively in my direction. "No problem at all. Cassidy was just leaving anyway, weren't you, dear?" The casual cruelty in her voice, the absolute dismissiveness, made my chest tighten painfully. This wasn't about cleaning or organizing or decluttering. This was deliberate. This was calculated. This was punishment for daring to exist in her world. I looked directly at the woman holding the watch, ignoring Diana completely. "That pocket watch belongs to me," I said calmly but firmly. "It was my grandfather's. It's registered property with legal documentation proving ownership." The woman's eyes widened considerably, and she immediately tried to hand the watch back to me, but Diana stepped forward quickly, inserting herself between us. "Cassidy, don't be so dramatic," she snapped, her facade of sweetness evaporating instantly. "You abandoned all this stuff when you moved out 3 months ago. You haven't been back here in ages. You clearly don't want any of it." That was an outright lie, and she knew it perfectly well. I'd moved out 3 months ago after Diana made living here absolutely unbearable, but I'd explicitly told my father, her husband, that I'd collect my remaining belongings once I found a bigger apartment with adequate storage space. He'd agreed without hesitation. We'd discussed it multiple times. Diana had been present for at least 2 of those conversations. "I didn't abandon anything," I said, my voice harder now, leaving no room for argument. "And you had absolutely no right whatsoever to give away my property without my explicit permission." Diana's expression shifted rapidly from smug satisfaction to visible annoyance. She turned to her friends with an exaggerated sigh. "Ladies, I'm so sorry about this. Family drama. You know how it is." "My name is Cassidy Marie Porter, and I'm 29 years old. I work as a legal assistant at Morrison & Associates, a prestigious downtown law firm specializing in estate documentation, property rights, and inheritance disputes. People often underestimate me because I'm naturally quiet, because I don't raise my voice or make dramatic scenes in public, but I've learned something absolutely crucial in my line of work over the past 7 years. The loudest person in the room isn't always the most powerful one. The person with proper documentation, with evidence, with meticulously organized records, that's who holds the real power. I'd grown up in this house, raised by my father and my late mother until I was 16 years old. After Mom died from breast cancer, Dad struggled emotionally and financially for several years before eventually meeting Diana at a charity fundraiser benefiting cancer research. They married quickly, far too quickly in my opinion. Within a year of their wedding, Diana had completely redecorated every single room, systematically erased every visible trace of my mother's existence, and made it abundantly clear through countless small cruelties that I was an unwelcome reminder of my father's past life. I'd tried desperately to make peace with the situation. I'd tried my absolute best to coexist peacefully. But Diana didn't want peace or coexistence. She wanted me gone completely, erased from my father's life as thoroughly as she'd erased my mother's memory from this house. My grandfather's pocket watch was far more than just a sentimental family heirloom. It was an authentic 1910 Hamilton Railway special, professionally appraised at approximately $8,000 due to its excellent condition and historical significance. But its value went far beyond mere money or market price. My grandfather, Thomas Porter, had carried that watch faithfully every single day of his adult life. He'd wound it each morning with the same careful ritual, checking the time with the precision and dedication of a man who'd spent 43 years working for the railroad company. Before he died, weakened by pneumonia in his final days, he'd placed that watch directly in my hands. "This watch has kept absolutely perfect time for over 100 years, he'd told me, his voice weak but still certain and clear. "It'll outlast all of us, Cassidy. Take care of it properly, and make sure it eventually goes to your own children someday." I'd registered it with the National Heirloom Registry immediately after his funeral, knowing exactly how valuable it was, both monetarily and sentimentally. The registry had photographed it from multiple angles, documented its unique serial number, recorded its complete provenance and ownership history, and tied it legally and irrevocably to my name with official paperwork. Diana didn't know any of this crucial information. She just casually handed over stolen property to her friend, creating a legal nightmare for herself. Diana had married my father 6 years ago when I was 23 and still living at home while finishing my undergraduate degree. At first, during the courtship and engagement period, she'd been pleasant enough, charming even, when my father was watching. But once the wedding ceremony was over and the honeymoon concluded, her true personality emerged like a venomous snake shedding its skin. She began systematically criticizing absolutely everything about me. My clothes were too casual and unfashionable. My career aspirations weren't impressive or ambitious enough. My very presence in the house made her uncomfortable and anxious. "This is my home now," she'd told me once, her voice cold and final, after I'd questioned why she'd thrown away my mother's handwritten recipe box without asking. "Your mother is gone, Cassidy, dead and buried. It's time to move forward and stop dwelling in the past." My father had been standing right there in the kitchen when she said it. He'd said absolutely nothing in my defense. That silence, that complete failure to protect me or honor my mother's memory, hurt far more than Diana's deliberately cruel words. Over the following years, she'd slowly but systematically erased every trace of my mother's memory from the house. Family photographs disappeared from walls and shelves. Furniture was replaced with modern pieces. Even the beautiful flower garden my mother had lovingly planted and tended was dug up completely and replaced with decorative rocks and minimalist landscaping. I'd moved back into my childhood home temporarily 8 months ago, after my apartment building was unexpectedly sold and converted into expensive condominiums. My father had insisted I stay with them while I searched for a new affordable place in an increasingly expensive housing market. "You're always welcome here, sweetheart," he'd said warmly. "This is still your home." Diana had smiled tightly and said nothing at all, but her eyes had spoken volumes. I'd paid rent faithfully, $500 a month, which was far below market rate for the area, but still a significant contribution. I'd stayed completely out of their way, kept exclusively to my room, worked long hours at the firm. I'd been the absolute perfect temporary tenant, causing no problems whatsoever. But Diana had hated every single second of my presence. She'd made increasingly passive-aggressive comments about my belongings, cluttering up her house. She'd complained bitterly that I used too much hot water, made too much noise early in the morning, took up too much space in the refrigerator. When I finally found a new apartment and moved out in June, I'd left several boxes behind. Items I didn't have adequate room for yet. things I'd specifically planned to collect once I settled in properly and could afford a storage unit. My father had explicitly said it was completely fine to leave them temporarily. Diana had apparently been counting down the days until she could strike, planning this violation all along. I didn't scream hysterically. I didn't cry or fall apart. I didn't grab the watch from the stranger's hand or create a physical confrontation. Instead, I smiled politely at Diana and said with perfect calm, "I completely understand the confusion. I'll take care of this situation myself through appropriate channels." Diana's eyes narrowed suspiciously. She'd clearly expected a dramatic fight, wanted me to lose control completely, to give her ammunition to call me unstable or emotionally unbalanced or unreasonable. When I didn't take the bait, visible confusion flickered across her face. "Take care of what exactly?" she asked, her tone sharp and demanding. "My property," I said simply, keeping my voice even and professional. "Don't worry about it at all." I pulled out my smartphone and methodically took several clear photographs, the room in its current state, the items spread out everywhere, the two women standing among my belongings. Diana's face appeared clearly in two of the shots, unmistakably visible and identifiable. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Documenting everything," I replied matter-of-factly. Then I turned calmly and walked out of the room without another word. Behind me, I heard Diana say something to her friends, her voice sharp with irritation and confusion. I didn't care what she was saying. She thought I was powerless, thought I'd just accept this violation. She was completely wrong. I sat in my car in the driveway for several minutes, forcing myself to breathe slowly and deeply, and opened my phone's contact list with trembling fingers. The National Heirloom Registry maintained a 24-hour hotline specifically for exactly this kind of urgent situation: theft, unauthorized transfer, or loss of registered items. I'd received the number when I first registered the watch years ago, but had never imagined I'd actually need to use it. My hands were still shaking with suppressed anger as I dialed the number. A professional-sounding woman answered on the second ring. "National Heirloom Registry. This is Patricia speaking. How can I help you today?" I took a deep, steadying breath before responding. "Hi, Patricia. My name is Cassidy Marie Porter. I need to report an unauthorized transfer of a registered heirloom item." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of rapid typing. "Can you provide the registration number for the item in question?" I recited it from memory without hesitation. I'd looked at that registration certificate so many times over the years, kept it safely stored in my important documents folder, that the number was permanently burned into my brain. I heard more typing on the other end, then a soft intake of breath. "Found it," Patricia said, her voice shifting to a more serious tone. "Hamilton Railway Special Pocket Watch, serial number 447829. Registered to Cassidy Marie Porter on October 15th, 2019. What's the specific nature of the unauthorized transfer you're reporting?" I explained everything in careful detail, how I'd temporarily stored personal items at my father's house with his explicit permission, how my stepmother had given them away without my knowledge or authorization, how a stranger was currently in possession of my legally registered property. Patricia listened attentively without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of acknowledgement. When I finished my explanation, she asked, "Do you have documentation proving your ownership beyond the registry itself?" "Yes," I said confidently. "I have the original registration certificate with the official seal, multiple photographs of the watch taken from different angles, a professional appraisal from 2 years ago valuing it at $8,000, and my grandfather's last will and testament specifically stating that the watch was bequeathed to me." "And do you have concrete evidence that the current possessor obtained it without your authorization or knowledge?" I thought immediately of the photographs on my phone, the timestamps, the clear images. "Yes, multiple photographs showing my stepmother in the process of giving away my belongings, time-stamped from less than an hour ago, with her clearly visible in the frame." "Miss Porter," Patricia said, her tone shifting to something more formal and official, "I'm flagging this item immediately as stolen property in our system. We'll contact local authorities and provide them with all relevant documentation. We'll also reach out to anyone who attempts to register, sell, appraise, or insure this watch going forward. Do you know the identity of the person who currently has physical possession of it? I gave Patricia the full name of Diana's friend, a woman named Brenda Louise Walsh, whom I'd met once at a strained holiday dinner 2 years ago. Patricia carefully noted everything down, asking me to spell the name twice to ensure accuracy. We'll contact her directly within the next hour, she said professionally. In our experience, most people don't realize they're in possession of stolen property when they receive items as gifts. Once they understand the serious legal implications, they usually return items immediately to avoid prosecution. What happens if she refuses to return it? I asked, needing to know all possible outcomes. Then it becomes a formal criminal matter, Patricia said simply, without hesitation. Possession of stolen property, even unknowingly obtained, can result in serious legal consequences, including criminal charges and civil liability. Most reasonable people choose to avoid that situation entirely. We finished the call after Patricia confirmed my contact information and current address. I sat in my car for another few minutes, staring at my father's house through the windshield. Through the front window, I could see Diana gesturing animatedly with her hands, probably explaining to her friends how completely unreasonable I was being, painting herself as the victim. My phone rang exactly 23 minutes later. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. I answered cautiously. "Hello? Is this Cassidy Porter?" A woman's voice asked, tight with obvious panic and distress. "This is Brenda Walsh. We need to talk immediately." Brenda was absolutely terrified. I could hear it clearly in her trembling voice as she frantically explained that the National Heirloom Registry had just called her personal cell phone, informing her that she was currently in possession of stolen property valued at $8,000 with serious legal consequences. "I didn't know," she kept repeating desperately. "I swear I had no idea. Diana told me explicitly that you didn't want any of it. She said it was all junk you'd left behind and abandoned. She was so convincing." "It's not junk," I said calmly but firmly, "and I never abandoned anything. Diana had absolutely no legal authority to give away my property without my explicit permission." "I'm bringing everything back to you," Brenda said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "Right now, this afternoon. I don't want any legal trouble whatsoever." "I appreciate your cooperation," I said, keeping my tone professional. "When you return the items, I'll need you to sign a brief written statement confirming that Diana gave you these items without my knowledge or permission." Brenda hesitated for just a moment. "Will that statement get Diana in legal trouble?" "That depends entirely on what else she's given away or sold," I said honestly, seeing no reason to lie. Exactly 1 hour later, Brenda arrived at my new apartment building with 3 cardboard boxes filled with my belongings, including the precious pocket watch carefully wrapped in tissue paper. Her hands visibly shook as she handed everything over to me. "I'm so incredibly sorry," she whispered, her eyes red. My father came home from his business trip that evening around 7 o'clock. I wasn't there to witness it. I was at my apartment, carefully inventorying everything Brenda had returned, checking each item against my detailed list. But Diana apparently called me 17 times in the span of 2 hours. I didn't answer a single call. Instead, I waited patiently for the inevitable. My father called at precisely 8 p.m. "Cassidy," he said, his voice strained and exhausted. "Can you please explain what happened today? Diana is extremely upset." "Diana gave away my property without permission," I said simply, stating the facts. "I recovered it through appropriate legal channels." "She said you deliberately embarrassed her in front of her friends." "She stole from me, Dad," I said flatly, letting the weight of that word hang in the air. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. "I'm coming over to your apartment," he said finally, his voice different now. "We need to talk about this face to face." He arrived 30 minutes later, looking absolutely exhausted and considerably older than his 56 years. I showed him the registration certificate with its official seal, the photographs I'd taken that afternoon, all the documentation proving ownership. I showed him the 3 boxes Brenda had returned. "I specifically told Diana you were planning to collect these items," he said quietly, staring at the boxes. I explicitly said she couldn't touch your belongings under any circumstances." "She did it anyway," I said simply. My father rubbed his face with both hands, a gesture of complete defeat. "I'll talk to her about this." "Dad," I said carefully, choosing my words precisely, "this isn't about talking anymore. This is about theft. This is about her violating my legal rights." While reviewing the returned items, I noticed something troubling. Several pieces of jewelry were missing, items that had belonged to my mother. I checked my inventory list, the one I'd made before moving out. 3 rings, 2 necklaces, and a bracelet were unaccounted for. My mother's wedding ring was among them. I felt sick. I called my father immediately. "Did Diana give away Mom's jewelry too?" I asked. The silence on the other end told me everything. "Let me call you back," he said. He called back 20 minutes later. His voice was different now, cold, angry. "Your mother's jewelry was part of her estate," he said. "It was specifically left to you in her will. Diana had no legal right to touch any of it." "Where is it?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "Diana claims she donated some items to charity last month. She says she didn't realize what they were." "That's a lie," I said flatly. "She knows exactly what she did." Diana didn't apologize. Instead, she went on the offensive. Over the next week, she called my father's family members, mutual friends, even my cousins, painting herself as the victim. "Cassidy is trying to destroy our marriage," she told anyone who would listen. "She's making false accusations because she's jealous of our happiness." Some people believed her. My father's younger brother called me, suggesting I was overreacting. An aunt I barely knew sent me a long email about forgiveness and family unity. But I had documentation, I had photographs, I had witness statements, I had the law on my side. When family members confronted me, I simply said, "Diana gave away property that was legally mine, including items from my mother's estate. If she believes she did nothing wrong, she's welcome to explain that to a lawyer." The calls stopped after that. Silence, I'd learned, could be more powerful than any argument. My mother's wedding ring was eventually located at a consignment shop downtown. The owner had purchased it from Diana 6 weeks earlier for $300. The ring was worth at least $2,000. I contacted the shop owner with documentation proving ownership. He was apologetic but firm. "I purchased this in good faith," he said. "I can't just give it back without being reimbursed." "You purchased stolen property," I replied. "I have my mother's will, which specifically bequeaths this ring to me. I also have a police report documenting the theft. You can return it voluntarily, or I can go through legal channels." He returned it the next day. When I picked it up, he asked, "Are you going to press charges against the woman who sold it to me?" I thought about it. "That depends on what else I find," I said. Over the next 2 weeks, I tracked down 4 more items Diana had sold or given away. Each recovery required documentation, phone calls, and sometimes threats of legal action. It was exhausting. But I got everything back. The house became unbearably tense. My father stopped speaking to Diana except when necessary. She moved into the guest room. At family dinners, they sat at opposite ends of the table in silence. I wasn't there to witness it, but my father told me about it during one of our weekly phone calls. "She won't admit she did anything wrong," he said, frustration evident in his voice. "She keeps saying she was just trying to clear out clutter." "Dad, she sold Mom's wedding ring for $300, I said. "She knew exactly what she was doing." He was quiet for a long moment. "I know," he finally said. "I think I've always known." 2 weeks later, Diana packed several suitcases and left. She told my father she needed space to think. He didn't ask her to stay. The house was quiet after that. Too quiet, my father said. But it was also peaceful for the first time in years. 4 weeks after the incident with my belongings, something unexpected happened at work. Our firm received a routine compliance inquiry from a corporate client, a standard review of vendor relationships and expense reports. I was assigned to assist with the preliminary document review. When I opened the file, my stomach dropped. One of the vendor companies under review was Diana's employer, a mid-sized marketing firm where she worked as a senior account manager. I immediately disclosed the conflict of interest to my supervising attorney. "My stepmother works there," I said. "I can't be involved in this review." He nodded. "We'll reassign it. Thanks for flagging that." The file went to another associate. I thought that would be the end of it. But 3 days later, my supervising attorney called me into his office. "That vendor review you flagged," he said carefully. "It's expanded into a full investigation. I wanted to give you a heads up." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. In my line of work, I understood what a full investigation meant. Irregularities had been found, possibly fraud, possibly embezzlement. Whatever it was serious enough to involve outside auditors and legal counsel. I kept my distance from the case entirely. I transferred all related files to other team members. I documented every step of my recusal process, everything above board, everything by the book. But I couldn't help overhearing conversations in the break room. Apparently, the investigation had uncovered a pattern of unauthorized expense claims and misallocated funds. Diana's name came up repeatedly. 2 weeks later, my father called. "Diana's company is conducting an internal investigation," he said. "She's been suspended pending the outcome." "I heard," I said carefully. "From the office?" "Yes, but I'm not involved in any way. I disclosed the conflict immediately and removed myself from anything related to her employer." The investigation continued for another month. I learned details secondhand, through office gossip, through my father's careful updates. Apparently, Diana had been submitting false expense reports for over 2 years, dinners that never happened, business trips that were actually personal vacations, equipment purchases that were never delivered. The amounts weren't enormous, a few $1,000s here and there, but they added up. When combined with other financial irregularities, the total came to nearly $40,000. The company's legal team found email evidence showing Diana had been deliberately hiding these expenses, spreading them across different accounts to avoid detection. She'd been careful, but not careful enough. When confronted, Diana claimed the charges were legitimate business expenses, but she couldn't provide receipts. She couldn't provide documentation. She couldn't prove anything. In the end, the evidence spoke for itself, just like it had with my belongings. My father called me on a Tuesday evening. I was making dinner when my phone rang. "She's being let go," he said without preamble. His voice was flat, emotionless. The investigation concluded. They're terminating her employment. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said, and I meant it, not for Diana, but for him. "She never told me about any of this," he continued. "The expenses, the falsified reports, I had no idea." "She never tells the truth when it matters," I said quietly. He was silent for a long moment. "No," he finally agreed. "She doesn't." We talked for another 20 minutes. He sounded tired, defeated. But there was also something else in his voice. Relief, maybe. Or acceptance. "I've contacted a divorce attorney," he told me before we hung up. "This marriage is over." I wasn't surprised. Some betrayals were too fundamental to overcome. Trust, once shattered completely, couldn't be rebuilt. Diana had lied to him, stolen from me, and destroyed her own career through greed and carelessness. Diana moved out of my father's house permanently in late September. She took only what was legally hers, supervised by my father's attorney to ensure nothing else disappeared. She'd lost her job, her reputation, and her marriage within the span of 2 months. All because she'd assumed I was powerless. All because she'd underestimated what documentation and persistence could accomplish. I heard through family members that she was planning to leave the state, start over somewhere new. I hoped she learned something from the experience, but I doubted it. People like Diana rarely accepted responsibility for their actions. They always found someone else to blame. My father seemed lighter after she left. We had dinner together once a week now, something we hadn't done in years. He'd started sorting through old photographs, rediscovering memories of my mother that Diana had tried to erase. "I should have stood up for you sooner," he told me one evening. "I know," I said simply, because it was true. I moved into a bigger apartment in October, a bright 2-bedroom place with hardwood floors and large windows. The pocket watch sits on my dresser now in a glass display case. Every morning I wind it carefully, just like my grandfather taught me. It still keeps perfect time. My mother's wedding ring is there too, along with her other jewelry, all properly stored and documented. These aren't just objects. They're connections to the people I've lost, tangible reminders of their love and their legacy. Diana had tried to erase that. She tried to erase me, but she'd failed because I knew my worth. I knew my rights, And I knew that silence and careful documentation were more powerful than any amount of shouting or drama. Sometimes the quietest people are the most dangerous opponents because they're listening, they're watching, they're remembering. And when the time comes, they act. Diana never contacted me after she moved out. No apology, no explanation, no attempt at reconciliation, just silence. And honestly, I didn't need anything from her. Her absence was enough. The last I heard, she'd moved to another state and found work at a smaller firm. I didn't ask for details. She was no longer my problem, no longer part of my life. My father finalized the divorce in December. He seemed younger somehow, unburdened. He'd started dating again, nothing serious, just coffee with a widow from his church. I forgot what it was like to be with someone kind, he told me. I was happy for him. We both deserved kindness after years of Diana's cruelty. The family members who'd initially sided with Diana quietly apologized. Some sent cards, others called. I accepted their apologies gracefully, but I didn't forget who'd stood by me when it mattered and who hadn't. Looking back now with the perspective of time, I understand exactly what Diana was trying to accomplish. She wanted to make me feel small, unwanted, completely disposable. She wanted to systematically erase every trace of my existence from my father's life, starting with my belongings and my mother's memory. But she made one critical, fundamental mistake. She assumed that quiet people were inherently weak people. She assumed that official documentation was just meaningless paperwork. She assumed that laws and registries and certificates were relevant unless you had money or power to enforce them. She was catastrophically wrong on every single count. Knowing your worth isn't about being loud or aggressive or confrontational. It's about understanding your rights and protecting them calmly and systematically. It's about having solid evidence when others have only excuses and lies. It's about patience and precision and refusing to be intimidated. My grandfather's watch still ticks steadily on my dresser, keeping perfect time, just as it has faithfully for over a century. My mother's rings catch the morning light each day, reminding me of her strength and grace. And I've learned something profoundly important through this entire experience. No one can give you away when you know exactly who you are and what you're worth. That knowledge, that unshakable certainty, is the most powerful thing you can possibly possess. And once you truly claim it, fully and completely, no one can ever take it from you again. Not through manipulation, not through theft, not through cruelty. Never again.